Ref blaming. Blaming the ref when your team loses. This is something which is it's not unique to any one team, be it international or kind of club teams in rugby. It's an across-the-board thing, and it's not even unique to rugby. They do it in every sport. Focusing on the ref for the outcome of a game, basically. I'll talk about that focus in this video. Talk about kind of the drive for consistency, some of the media influences, and a couple of suggestions that I have thought about. And you guys can let me know your thoughts as well. The reason I brought this one up is because there's been a fair bit of backlash against some of the refs already here at the Rugby World Cup. South Africa against New Zealand has been a big one. Also, the Fiji and Australia game for missing a high shot by one of the Aussie guys, and also the ref apparently giving a high five to one of the Fijian players after they scored a try. And also in the Japanese-Russian game, there was another, I think, dirty shot in that game that went unnoticed by the ref team, and I don't think there was a sighting in that one, but hey. We're only like 8 games in, and there's already been multiple games where the focus has been on the ref. And as I said, I can think back to when Wayne Barnes was public enemy number 1 here in New Zealand. The Lions tour, the refs were under the gun again, so New Zealand does it differently. Good old-fashioned ref blamers, like a lot of the South African fans are right now, but a lot of us are not as well. I think maybe we can all be at times, but refs are human and prone to mistakes. That's one thing I guess we all have to remember. Could they do a better job? Yes. So could our players at times. Sometimes I think that focus which we put on the ref is sometimes a wee bit misplaced, and that we, not in particular reference to any of the games recently, but sometimes there might be one decision that goes poorly, and we look at that as the one decision which cost the team the game. And over the course of 80 minutes, there's missed tackles, there's drop passes, there's all kinds of stuff which our team did as well, which also adds to that. And I think in most games, the ref's influence is probably not the deciding factor, like the one deciding factor in a game. Sure, refs do make mistakes. As I said, they're human. They can make errors like the players. But should the focus be on the refs? Probably not. Every now and again, there's an absolute howler where they just miss things over and over again, or there's blatant decisions which maybe are costly, but I feel like that's the exception rather than the rule, even though fans would probably have you believe that often the ref is the one that cost the game. Anyway, that's just kind of my thoughts on that one. I do think, though, in terms of flipping the coin around the other side, that you're not really allowed to talk about the refs' performances in rugby, and I know that they do go behind kind of a behind closed doors like review, and apparently it's quite in depth, and they're corrected and coached, and supposed to be kind of on performance improvement and whatnot for all their reffing skills or lack of. But I feel like at times, sometimes that could do with being more public. I mean, I may not be able to foresee some unintended consequences to doing that, but other sports, sometimes if a ref has a poor performance, just like a player, they get dropped or they get demoted or they get sent to do like second division. Now that may happen as well. I mean, you've seen they selected refs for the Rugby World Cup, and some of them didn't make it. That's kind of a judgment call based on their performances, saying you weren't good enough to perform at the pinnacle event. But all of that seems very secret squirrel, and we're never really told. At least I don't remember seeing much. Every now and again you see that a ref's been dropped, like because they're not fit enough, or like they were asked to go out and help some kind of like clarify some decision for a team, and then they're not allowed to ref that team in the next game because there's maybe conflict of interest or something. But it's never like some other sports where it's like this person's been dropped because they had a poor performance. I don't feel like there should be that kind of protection level around refs. I mean, it's a pretty hard job, pretty thankless, but I don't think that you should fear that kind of open discussion about stuff. If you do a rubbish job, you should be able to get feedback on that, and if you do a good job, obviously you should be able to get that positive feedback as well. But it's kind of one that the refs only get talked about for the negative stuff. Nextly, a little word on consistency. Consistency is an interesting one in rugby because it's the same thing that we all call out for. We want consistency. We want all the refs to do it the same way. But it's pretty much openly accepted that you have to play the game to the interpretations of the particular ref. And captains talk about it all the time, that they didn't adapt quick enough to the ref. And that's just a thing in rugby. And actually, some of the most popular refs, like Nigel Owens, although some people can't stand him, is relatively well liked. You feel like he's the guy who often refs partially on his intuition or feeling rather than just going by the rule book. And it is refs who only ever follow the rulebook to the letter. They ping every little thing, and the game is so stop-start that it's really painful to watch. So it's a tough one. We want consistency, but we also don't want the game stopped every 2 seconds. Sometimes you'd rather the ref just yell at the guy, get out of there 7, instead of stopping the game. If it was consistent, I suppose they would stop the game every time, but there is, I believe, kind of room for that interpretation in there from the refs. But yeah, that's a word on consistency. Obviously, we'd like it to be more consistent. The media, I don't think the media helped the situation by often kind of fueling the fires of that ref judgment. So often if there's been a decision which was an important one, it's the first question that they ask in the press conference, and they hammer on about it and they write articles about it. And then we've seen these stories in the media recently. I think the New Zealand media did it when we lost the first Bledisloe game, where they start to freeze frame all these different moments where Australian player did this, Australian player did that, and we're focusing on all that stuff. And now we're seeing it more and more. It's all over social media. People highlighting every little thing that was missed, every little I that wasn't dotted, every little T that wasn't crossed. If that happens, I would like to see them do it for both sides. People are very selective with what they highlight. I feel like over the course of 80 minutes, most teams get away with something and get pinged for something, whether it's down the middle or slightly one side. It differs game to game. And as I said at the beginning, sometimes it will be that one team really doesn't get the rub of the green, but again, I feel like that's not the majority of situations. Sometimes I think it also must be stated that the refs are often just following the protocols that they're given by World Rugby. Like the dangerous tackle stuff, they've got guidelines that they have to follow, and every now and again you'll see a ref put what seems like common sense into there, but often if they're just following the protocols, they're kind of forced to give like a red card or something for stuff that seems maybe innocuous, but those rules are there, I think, for the most part, to stop guys getting brain damage and stuff. So could be implemented better, but I think the overall message there is probably a positive one. Now, suggestions. Some of these things I've been thinking about for a while, and some of them you've probably seen in other sports or read about. So there's a few things. Having two refs on the field, because one ref to keep up with the game is hard work. I'm not sure if two refs would help, because you're still going to have human error. I know football tried it by having when they were absolutely refusing to implement goal line technology, they would have another ref, I forget what they called them, but standing behind the goal. So to look out for anything that crosses the line or whatnot. There were still mistakes. I don't remember a marked improvement in the performance of the reffing during that. I think Rugby League in Australia has two refs, and they still get stuff wrong. One thing Rugby League does do, though, is stand down refs who make blatant errors. They stand them down, and they don't make any secret about it that they're being stood down for poor performance. It's kind of like an open performance system, so that's one thing. I don't know a whole lot about it, but it seems to be a thing in Rugby League. I think, and this one I thought of it a while ago, and then I saw John Kerwin mention it on one of New Zealand's rugby shows, so I was disappointed I didn't mention it before I saw him say it, but I agree with his idea, and it's having a prop as a TMO. Like, all the refs who are former players are pretty much all 9s or 10s, maybe other positions as well, but there's never any props. So I feel like, you can definitely give the refs coaching on some of the stuff at scrum time, and their understanding is probably better than most of ours. But I feel like having a prop do the TMO job and being able to focus in on some of the stuff that goes on at scrum time would probably help, just to give them a bit of a leg up and not have, if it is again former players, not have it always be from that point of view of your 9s and your 10s. So get some of the low numbers guys in there to be TMOs and see what their interpretations are. I think that's a decent idea. Obviously the former props are generally not in a condition to run around for 80 minutes and chase the game, so TMO seems to be a sensible option for them. Even if it's just sitting beside the TMO for top games as some kind of TMO's assistant, as a scrum TMO, I don't know. But I feel like there's a place for them in the game, whereas at the moment there doesn't seem to be one in terms of controlling the game. I haven't heard this one mentioned, but I feel like given that it's 2019, there should be some way of putting some kind of tracker on the ball, the same way they do with the Hawkeye thing, is it in cricket, which is the one for soccer, with the goal line thing, which can somehow give you a very quick indication as to whether a pass is forward. Because it's one of the things that kind of drives me nuts when you see people saying, oh, that pass was forward, no, that pass wasn't forward, the camera angle shows it wasn't forward. It'd be nice if they had a system which showed, does it travel backwards out of the hands initially and then it travels forward, just to be definitive. That can't be a hard fix, right? Same with lineouts not going straight. There has to be some way you can put in something in the ball for the top games which tracks passes being forward or not and gives the ref some kind of alert if there's a forward pass. I don't know. Maybe that's me being naive about the technology. That feels like one that should be an easy fix, but I don't know. And lastly, people have sometimes called out for rugby to have a review system. So like cricket has that, other sports have that, where like a coach's challenge kind of thing, maybe a captain's challenge, where you can basically ask the TMO to check something. And the captains try to do it now, where they will go up to the ref and ask them to have a look at something. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. Sometimes they say we're already checking it. But to formalize that system, and I can see benefits in that, but I can also see some drawbacks in that as well. The benefits obviously being that if there is a howler that a ref has genuinely missed, that the captain has the ability to go and call them on that and get them to change it if it's indeed incorrect. I do also see the game slowing down a fair bit if you do that. And like some of the most entertaining periods of rugby are at the end of the game, right, when everyone's tired. And rugby is already fairly stop-start. And if you're giving more TMO time, more stoppages, that's like more props and locks and loose forwards who've got 5-10 minutes to take a breather, to get that extra level of fitness back into them. So those gaps in the 70th minute aren't there because the guys have still got the air in their lungs to move and close that gap. So players are going to get bigger because they don't have to run around as much without having a break. Bigger players probably means more concussions. So I'm kind of torn on keeping the game going and not letting those howler decisions kind of get through. So I can kind of see value in that. I do follow a bit of the NHL, and a couple of seasons ago they actually changed the rules for the coaches challenge, is what they call it there, that if you get it wrong, so if you ask them to review it and you're incorrect, so the initial decision was correct, then you get penalized. So you get the other team gets a power play, so they get an extra man on the field for 2 minutes or on the ice. So that was in response to coaches overusing the challenge for that purpose of like resting players or just trying to waste time. So it's a delay of game penalty that they get if they get it wrong. But yeah, this may have been a wee bit of a ramble, but just a few thoughts. Ultimately, I think mistakes are going to happen from the players, coaches with their selections, from the refs. It is going to happen. We all like to think that the refs, for the most part, will be unbiased. I don't think there's any absolute bias in the refs definitely trying to make one team win, but they definitely do miss some of the calls. It is a fact of life. I like to think I can accept that at this point. But yeah, it's wait and see if something really goes against the All Blacks, and I'll see if I'm still wearing that kind of neutral hat at that stage. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts on this kind of hot button topic, and yeah, I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.